Just making sure we got all our things going. There you go. Go back to here. Okay. And okay. So I'm going to begin because what always happens with my lives is that it seems most people watch afterwards, and that's fine. That's the idea. We do live and then we record so that whoever wants to watch it can watch it afterwards. So everybody can get to see it afterwards. So good evening. It's 6 o'clock, kind of, sort of. So let me make, please allow me to, I have to make a confession. I have to acknowledge. Earlier today, this morning actually, when I was doing the reminder for this evening, I put 6 p.m. Island time, and then I changed it like immediately because I thought island time. I said I'm an island woman, and so island time means we we kind of late or not. Island time means there was an airline in the Caribbean which was called LIAT, which actually meant Leeward Islands Air Transport or Transportation. But our humorous, smart people called it Leave Island Anytime because it worked on island time. And I don't feel bad about island time because I'm aware that island time works everywhere. It's not just those of us who live in the Caribbean. It's not a peculiarity of Caribbean people, okay? Island time is island time in Hawaii, in the South Seas. Darlena, hi, hello, my lovely. It's so good. Thank you for coming on. So I changed it 6 p.m. on the island, but then it was in my head, I suppose. And I am sorry, I'm starting a little bit late because I'm an island woman, so sometimes I do island time. And actually, it's an interesting thing because when we are on island time, when we are not on the island, some people get all bent out of shape when you're late, and I totally understand that because in big cities where lives are faster and there are more things to do and more people to see and longer distances to go, 5-10 minutes can make a difference. Also, if you're 5 or 10 minutes late for your flight, most of the time you miss the flight. And so I get it, but I refuse to be shamed about island time. I refuse to do it. So when I'm in the big cities and people talk about, these people who are always late. Oh, let me just adjust this a little bit. And how important it is for people to be on time. And I understand that. But when they tell me things like, it's so disrespectful, it means that you don't value the other person's time. Some even go so far as to say it means that you have no respect for the other person, which of course is not true. It's not true most of the time. Of course, there are times when you just don't care whether you even arrive, never mind whether you're late or early. But I promise you that most of the time in the islands, it's not about it. No, it's nothing to do with the respect. It's not that we don't respect each other. Clearly, it's that island time. So, however, forgive me for being late. I am in the island, though. Forgive me for being late. I said 6 p.m. on island. And however, I have, let me just do a little bit of a backstory, because for those of you who are just coming on today, this is number 3 in the series, The Many Worlds of Women. And in the first one, we talked about me being an island woman as well as a city woman. I love having come from, when I say that, coming from an island. I also love cities. New York City is one of my favorites. I love Shanghai. I love London. I love Paris. I love Rome. I love big cities. Buenos Aires is a beautiful city. You can't get around it easily, but it's a big city. Kuala Lumpur is a beautiful city. And I feel really at home and comfortable in cities. So I'm a city woman and an island woman to the same degree. When I'm in the city, I'm completely at home. When I'm on the island, I'm totally, fully at home, whichever the island or whichever the city. And then yesterday we talked about, and of course, no, yesterday was island. Then we talked before that, about being a woman. So what I said just now was yesterday, day number 2. Day number 1 was being a woman, living in the world of women, and being a woman living in a man's world. And I talked about, the old James Brown song, It's a Man's World, which ends by saying, it ain't nothing without a woman. But, by the time he gets to that point, you kind of have moved along. And the idea, the thinking about that, my thinking about that is, of course, as women, there's certain things that women just do together. Women, we've been programmed, we've been socialized, we've been trained, we have been co-opted into some of the things that are not good for us. But as women, we found ways to navigate this world created by men for men so that it works for us as well as it possibly could. It doesn't, hello there. It doesn't work for everyone everywhere. Mahsa Amani, for example, died a week, 10 days ago, because she wasn't wearing hijab the way the men had determined that she should. And now the Iranian government has pulled out the female enforcers to patrol the streets and enforce women wearing hijab, women covering up. So the world of women is very complex. The world of women is filled with women who are totally focused and committed to women's equality and women's advancement and all of those things. And it also is filled with women who are part of, let me just adjust this a little bit, who are part of the problem because they also have been trained to understand, to believe, to support the notion that women are less, that women should follow the rules set for them by men. And I say that, when I say set by men, I really mean that. It sounds, when you talk about these things, lots of times they say, well, the world has changed. But the fact of the matter is, the world is still working to a model that was created when men were the only ones in charge. And of course, it's clear that there are powers that want it to remain that way, not just powers. The majority apparently wants it to remain that way because it's not changing as much as we would like. It's a struggle, it's a fight, and not just with men, and not all men want it this way, by the way, but because there are women also. Yesterday I talked about the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States, which was passed in the Senate in 1972. Long before you were born, Darlena. And to date, 2022, it still has not been ratified by most of the states. So the idea of women's equality obviously is problematic for many people. And if it were not problematic for the majority, or at least for the active majority, one would think that it would have changed by now, except that even with an active majority wanting it, the people who make the decisions are still mostly men. And so, just as with the abortion debate in the United States, I saw photographs of people meeting at the White House 2, 3, 4 years ago to discuss contraceptive care and choice for women, and was horrified, like many other people, to see that there were no women in the room much of the time. So many meetings were held with no women. And if you look at the composition of the American Congress, you will see that there is a dearth of women. There are more women now than there were in 1972, many more, but still obviously not enough to shift it, or not enough who have undone the training to shift it. So the work continues. So there is me. There I am, counting the worlds of which I'm a part. I'm a woman living in a woman's world. This complex, complicated, convoluted, exciting, and also very, very, what's the word? Sometimes frustrating and frightening world, actually very often frightening. And there's me living in the world created by men, which is very often exciting and fascinating and very often dangerous and frightening. I also live in a tiny island, tiny Caribbean, tiny tropical island. And I also live in the wide world, in big cities in the wide world. Today, I'm talking about my fifth and sixth worlds. I'm a Black woman, so that's a world all by itself. And I am also a Black woman living in a Eurocentric world, which is a whole nother story. It's sort of like being a woman living in a man's world, because the Eurocentric world is set up on the same sorts of principles. In the man's world, the thinking is that women just we don't measure up. Women, they're not strong enough, not smart enough, not good enough, not enough. Not fat enough, not skinny enough, not dark enough, not tall enough, not round enough, not never enough. And in the Eurocentric world, women who look like me meet the same thing. The principles are the same. If you're Black, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're never enough. The principles are the same. And so the response is, as a woman, as a Black person living in a Eurocentric world, my responses are pretty much the same. Of course, I am competent. I am capable. I'm just as strong, just as smart, just as good. All of those things. You say I'm not, but you also know that I am. The same way men say women are not, but they know. And it's the same fascination in my mind. The same way I don't understand. I literally cannot understand how men, the logic that men use when they talk about women, they believe really strongly that they're just not smart enough. We're just not, The same thing goes through my head when I think of this Eurocentric world in which we live, in which people actually believe there are people who would stake their lives on the notion that Black people of African descent, are just not enough. There was a time when, in the Christian church, people believed that Black people couldn't go to heaven. If there's a heaven, they will not have Black people. Then there was a time when they believed that Black people were to come to heaven to be slaves. There are places in the world where it is thought that where religions think that women don't get to the equivalent of heaven. In Hinduism, women are not considered as much as men. Women are considered less than men. Let me just say, they're considered less than men. And it is thought that, in Hinduism, Hindus believe in reincarnation, which means you come back, you die and you come back in a different form. And coming back as a woman is a step down. It's like coming back as an animal, same sort of principle. Maybe not quite as low as animals, but the same principle. If you come back as a woman, it means that you're further from nirvana than the men. And it's the same thing if you're dark skinned in India, you're further from nirvana, less likely to get to nirvana. It'll have to be when you've come back, you've lived an exemplary life so many times. Each time you come back, each time you're reincarnated, you come back higher on the scale, and then you'll stop coming back as a woman. You'll come back as a man. And then nirvana is available to you. So the principles are the same, and it boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. And it would be just a matter of interest and something you read about and write about and think about and have philosophical conversations, academic discussions about, except that so many people's lives are destroyed, damaged by this thinking. In the same way that women's lives still are, in so many places, destroyed, not allowed. The same way in places like India and China, there still is femicide. There still are too many instances of children being aborted when their parents find out they're female, or children being killed once they're born and their parents realize that they are with their girls. And in India, for example, girls being called names that mean unwanted. All of these things are happening in the world in which we live. And that is why I do the work that I do. That is why I do the work that I do. I work in this little island that I come from. I work in this land that I come from for the advancement and elevation of people who look like me, the people who look like me, and who are whose ancestors have been enslaved, colonized, dismissed. And my ancestors on both sides, my ancestors as a girl, as a woman, and my ancestors as a Black woman, as an African woman. Another interesting aspect of this, and I hadn't set a specific day for it because I set 3 days for this series. There are also these other two worlds in which I live, which are somewhat along the lines of small island, big city. And there is that, and actually also come out of, in many ways, the notion of other and European, Eurocentric and everybody else. And that is, I come from a quote unquote third world country. Hello there, and welcome. I come from a third world country. Because I am of African ancestry, I'm automatically third world, but I also come from the Caribbean. And with all of the wonder and beauty and civilization and so on in the Caribbean, we are thought to be third world because, of course, the first world is the European world. Again, the issue for me there is people's lack of something, depriving the others of us of the good that other people bring, of the contribution that people could make. Because this notion of other that we're talking about today, being of African descent, living in a Eurocentric world, affects people not of African descent who are not of the who are not European. Yeah. So, for example, China has a history also of attempts, for want of a better term, at colonization. There's still buildings in Shanghai. There's a whole quarter in Shanghai, which is still very much peopled by and considered still to be very much Europe. I was reading yesterday about a city I think in Uganda or Angola, I can't even remember now, which is called the Paris of Africa, because of course the European city is the standard. There's a city, a part of Shanghai, which is the same. The thinking is the same. I think of United States. I'm reading still of migrants coming up from South America, and we're not going to get into the geopolitical, the political, the economic issues on why they come. That's a whole nother discussion. But part of the problem there is that they might be Eurocentric to some degree because they also were colonized by the Europeans, but they're not European. And so because the systems of the world have been set up to accommodate and facilitate and reflect European values and principles and so on, they are encountering pretty much the same things that Africans, that people look like me do. The same emotions are directed at them, are thrown at them. They are considered less of everything. So I went looking because I just thought it might be interesting to go find out how many people of African descent there are in the world. And there's a website called Population Review, which, to answer the question, how many Black people are there in the world, says, if you believe that Black is as simply defined as a person of African descent, then the total number of Black people in the world is about 7.8 billion. That was in 2020, which is pretty much the, not pretty much, which is the population of the world in 2020. They go on to say every person alive now and every person who has ever lived is of African ancestry. The only question is the number of generations it's been since a person's ancestors left. My ancestors left, don't know what generations, but 400 years ago or so. Actually, one of my closest ancestors left 200 years ago. There is in my family a man that I'm told was called Dada Mina. Dada is the way we say Dada in my island. It means daddy, it means father. And Mina is because he was of the Mina tribe in West Africa. And the Mina tribe is still in parts of Togo and so on. And he was one of the last Africans brought to the Caribbean before the slave trade was formally ended. And I say formally because those of you who don't know, it was formally ended, but it kept on going for many years after that. And some would tell you it still goes on. And so I know that part of my ancestry is of the Mina tribe of Africa. Hey there. And that's important to me. I also know, however, that part of my other ancestry is Irish, because Irish people were also hounded out of England, out of Ireland by the British, by the English specifically. And some of them ended up in Montserrat. And on my father's side of the family, there is a history there. My grandfather told me his people came here when Cromwell drove the Irish out of Ireland, when England, the whole history of Protestantism and Catholicism and Irish and British and land and not land. And so that complicates the world in which I live. And that just makes it even more absurd. That just makes it even more absurd. Now, the common factor in all of this comes back to me being a woman and living in all of these worlds. And in every single one of these worlds, I live at a disadvantage. I live at a disadvantage as a woman, even a woman's world, because I'm a Black woman in this women's world. And the other women who believe that Black women are not as much as. I am living in a man's world where many men, most men, I hazard to say, because they've been trained that way, believe that women, Black or white, are just not enough. And then, of course, because I come from a small island, people think that, well, yeah, there's something, you small island, you're not as much as somebody who was born in a big city or on a continent. And then I go to the city and I'm thought to not be enough just because I'm a woman. And then again, because I'm a Black woman. So as a woman, even as a woman in the third world, in what's considered the third world, I'm considered not enough, because it's not only white men who think that Black women are not enough. Black men think that women, many Black men, think that women also, many third world men, quote unquote, think that women are not as much as they. The whole idea of maleness, of men being more, is universal. And we're working to stop that. for all kinds of reasons, including the fact that it's to the advantage of men. The world will be a better place for men. Life will be richer, more fun, more interesting, more exciting for men when women are free to contribute. I can, this is, well, let me put it this way. They'll have even more time to watch sports. And guess what? They'll actually be able to talk to women more about sports, because this notion that women don't like sports and sports is not for women and so on, that's rubbish. Women play sports, women enjoy sports, women can talk sports. I've heard some women talk cricket. I've heard some women talk basketball. I've heard some women talk football. That would put any man to shame. Compare with any of the best, the most knowledgeable. And so the reason why I decided to do this live was because, like I said in the first one, always it has been a challenge for me. It has been I just don't understand it. Ever since I was a child, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why girls were thought, I was in a class with boys and none of them were smarter than me. They were better at one thing or the other, but not one of them was smarter than I was. And I could climb trees, and I could run, and I could play cricket. I could do all kinds of things that boys could do, and as well as many of them, and better than some of them. So what was this? And I knew lots of other girls who were just like me. And I've grown up, and I know women. I've been meeting women who are competent, capable at all of those things that they say women are not, including, for example, religion. We're not going to talk about religion. I don't get involved in people's religions, but the notion religion is one of the reasons why we've been taught that one of the avenues, through which, one vehicles through which we have been made to believe that women are just not enough. Many religions, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Ifa even. And so over the last few weeks and months, actually, I think it goes back to last year after my mom died, the whole notion of who I am as a woman came back. When my dad died, the question for me was, I carry his name. I'm Shirley Osborne. With my dad not being present, my dad having gone, do I change? Does something about me change because this man is no longer here? Because I no longer have this live relationship with him? And the same thing happened and I got through that. And don't ask me how, I don't know. You don't know how you get through these things, you just do. And then my mom died last year. And the question came up, but it was different. It was different. It wasn't just a question of, am I my mother's daughter? It's, am I my mother? Am I my mother? I know there were times I didn't want to be my mother. There were times when I said, my mother was a teacher. And on more than one occasion, as a child, as a teenager, I swore there's one thing I would never be is a teacher. And I find myself teaching, not the same way my mother did, but very much a teacher. And after she died, other questions came up about me as a woman and what it means to be a woman in the world, and issues of motherhood and sisterhood and being a daughter and an auntie and, relationships, a friend, a sister, all of those suddenly a new series of questions, a new set of questions was generated around those. And I've been pondering it this last year. It has stayed right here. Through the grief and the working my way through and refinding myself, these conversations came up. And last week, 10 days or so ago, I started thinking about these different worlds. I started putting it in this perspective, in this context. The worlds in which I live, the kinds of women that I am, the worlds in which I live, and how I operate within this, and how other women operate. And, do other women have these? Of course, I'm not the only woman who asks these questions. How do other women answer these questions is what I'm interested in finding out. How do you answer these questions? Who am I? Who do I become? Who do I grow into? Which part of me do I leave behind, and when and why? And when we lose our parents, what does that do to us? Even when we're adults. Even when we're adults. And I've worked with and loved and taught young girls who had challenges with their mothers, whose mothers were not available, were not present, were not doing the things that we think mothers are supposed to do. And I've worked with women who have lived with their mothers their entire lives. I have worked with women who, as adults, still live in the houses that their mothers live in. And so I know how complicated this relationship, this motherhood relationship is, this mother-daughter relationship is. And I know that how we function in each of these worlds in which we live, because we all live in all of these different worlds. We all live in many different worlds. We're not just one. We all live in many different worlds. And how we are as a woman in these worlds is the result, is a function of, among other things, how we were prepared by the relationship we've had with our mothers. Good, bad, or indifferent, positive, negative, or otherwise. Deeply loving, totally distant, whatever it was, whatever the relationship was with our mother, informs, defines, to a large extent, the woman that we are and how we operate in these different worlds, I believe. And so I did these lives so I could have this conversation. And I've seen some comments. People, one of the interesting things when I do my lives is that people send me comments afterwards. And I find that very interesting, but not surprising at all, because I'm also very much aware that on social media, women also have to be very, very careful. And so when I get the comments, when I get the questions in my direct message, personal message, I am reminded again of how vulnerable women are in this world in which we live. And so part of what I do with these lives and being so sort of public, for want of a better term, is help to shift some of that, I hope. Because until all women are safe, not just feel safe, but are safe in public spaces, none of us is. Not one of us is. And one of the reasons we are not safe in public spaces, or private spaces actually, is because there still is this notion that a woman's world is different. There still is this reality that a woman's world is different, because women are treated differently. But as I look at myself in all of these different worlds, the other question that comes up for me, the other realization actually that comes up is they're really not very different worlds. They're all the same. The same things that affect me in the world of women are the same ones that affect me in the world created by men. The same things that I desire in my small island world, the same things I desire in my city woman world. The same things that come at me, the same pressures, the same negative energy, the same fears, actually, I have them in my small island for the same reasons as I have them in the big city, except for certain sorts of crime. Yeah. In my small island. In other small islands, it's just the same as in a big city, pretty much. My life as a third world woman, quote unquote, is very much predicated on what happens in the other world. First and second worlds, evidently. I think we are fourth worlds now, actually. There's some parts of the world that are being called the fourth world. My life as an African woman is very much influenced by my life in the world, in the Eurocentric world. And I think, for example, of a few. I saw an article some time ago about a couple of African countries who are Nigeria just a few weeks ago has passed a law, I think, or made a policy decision about the advertising and the use of foreign and European models in advertising for national companies, for companies that belong to Nigeria. There are countries in Africa which are and I can't remember which, there are two of them, I think, that I've read of, where the government has actually stepped in and said, if you work for the government, you can't come in wigs and false nails and all those things. Because so much of Africa, so many women in Africa who live in the Eurocentric world are following the Eurocentric examples. When I was a child, I used to have my hair used to be in plaits, but for special occasions, I'd get sent to have my hair straightened and curled because the European looking hair was the important, that was for important events, important occasions. And African women around the world wearing their hair always in wigs and their hair straightened and weaves and so on, that the comedians have so much fun with, make fun of women. All of that is because why? Because they too live in a Euro. Hi, Ernest. We have a man here. Thank you. Welcome. Because they live in a Eurocentric world. The values, the principles that are taught, that are said to be, that we have been trained, doctrinated, conditioned into believing are the important ones, are Eurocentric ones. And that is why African women all over the world straighten their hair. That is why Asian women get their eyes changed. That's why in Brazil, so many women spend so much money on cosmetic surgery, because there's a model, there's an example that we are all told we must adhere to if we are going to be thought to be women of anything. So you always hear when you hear stories of women, you also hear how they are, how they look, how their hair looks, how their bodies look, how their everything looks. Because there's this model, this pattern, this form that we must fit, or we're even more less than. So if I look back on my thoughts over these last 3 days and today, it seems like I'm talking about 8 different worlds in which I live. At least I've spoken of 8. But it is quite possible, and they're not just possible, it is actually quite true that there are many others. The reality, though, is that there really are just one. I'm so sorry. The worlds we live in are just one. All of those worlds make up one that we're all part of, that we all contribute to, that we all should have the right to contribute to. And I say all of this that I'm saying to drive home, to make the point that I want to make, that the world is being deprived. All of those worlds, whether it's all of those worlds or just one, sorry, people, the 8 billion people in the world, are being deprived by women not being allowed full participation and maximum contribution. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I want to impress on everybody everywhere that it is in our best interests, all of ours. Sorry. It's in our best interests to do everything we possibly can to change that, to fix that, to make all of these worlds, or this one world, a place that is safe for women, because being safe for women means also safe for men and children. Make this world a world in which every person has the opportunity. We have the right. We're born with the right, but has the opportunity, or the opportunities, to contribute all of the best of themselves. The way I said it yesterday is, if you have a team in which people are not contributing, the team fails. The team does not do as well as the team could. When everybody is supported, allowed, facilitated in making the full contribution, whether it's taking the shots or playing defense or running their whatever, when everybody is allowed to do their part well, when people are not prevented, actually is what I said, because it's not about being allowed. We are being prevented. Women are being prevented from making our contribution, our best contribution. And the world is therefore being deprived, seriously deprived, of much, much, much that is good. I see it in the world of women. I see it in the world of men. I see it in the island world. I see it in my city world. I see it in my African world. I see it in the Eurocentric world. I see it in my third world. I see it in all the worlds. I see what they're being deprived of. I've had the privilege of having done a lot of travel to a lot of places. I've been on every continent in the world. Let me just put it that way. And that is just the broad, except the ones at the top and the bottom of the world. And I've seen what happens when women are not prevented, when women are allowed, women are facilitated, supported. I've also seen what happens when they're not. And so I work to ensure that in my little island, we never are not. We never are prevented. We never are not allowed. And I work for that in the other worlds too. That's why I created the Women's Leadership Circle. That's why I do this work. And that's why I thank you ever so much for having listened to me. We did a long one today. To make it for me being late, I suppose. For me working on island time. There's good in all of my worlds. I promise you, there's good in all of my worlds. My work is to enhance that good, expand that, and reduce the negative. So join me. Hang out with me sometimes. Come hang out with me sometimes. I'll be doing more and more lives because I'm at that stage now where that's what I'm going to be doing. And so every week I'll be doing one live about my little island, because my fundamentals, right? One live about my little island and one live about women in the world. They'll both be interesting and engaging and fun. And they will not last 45 minutes. I promise you. Today was an extra long one. Because as I was talking to you, I'm looking at my notes, and the notes just are never enough. So thank you for having borne with me. Is that how you say it? Thank you for bearing with me for 45 minutes. Thank you ever so much. I really, really appreciate this. Send me a message, send me some notes, tell me what you think, what you thought, how you feel. I got some questions last night about whether it's women who keep women back or whether it's men. Questions like that. I'm always eager to engage. So ShirleyOsborne.com. You can leave a message in the box in there. It just pops up when you log on. And in the meantime, until next time, until next week, take good care. Thank you ever so much.